What is up, guys? Welcome into episode number 90 of the Loose Sports Talk podcast. I'm Ethan Hannaford. Tonight, I am joined by Hampel TJ Williamson. And if you're joining for the first time to the Loose Sports Talk, you're like, what the heck? I've never seen this before on STL Sports Central. There's all kinds of videos that are on STL Sports Central. New content literally every single day. But you're like, where do these guys come from? Well, that's because usually we do not live stream, but we are always releasing a new video every single Wednesday morning. They come out usually around 8 o'clock. And if you go to the video section of STL Sports Central's YouTube channel or to our podcast page on Spotify or Apple Podcasts at the Loose Sports Talk, that is where you will be able to find our content. As mentioned, I'm Ethan Hannaford. You've probably seen me on STL Sports Central talking about the Cardinals, the Blues, throughout the past, however long we're getting to about a year now that STL Sports Central has been in existence. I've been here around since the beginning. Hampel and TJ Williamson have been doing the Loose Sports Talk with me now for at least 2 to 3 years. We've been rolling now for a little while. We joined the STL Sports Central family probably in the last 3 to 4 months, and we love being here. We've loved bringing this video aspect to our podcast, and tonight is just another step along the way as we continue to just figure this thing out. And like I said, that is because we are going live for the first time. And what a better time of year, what a better subject to go live for than bringing in a little bit of the national spotlight, the college football playoff, what has been one of the most controversial things in all sports since it got underway a little over 10 years ago. We've had some knockdown dragouts between the three of us discussing some of these things in the past. And, who knows? Maybe tomorrow there's more of that in store on this episode number 90 of the Loose Sports Talk podcast. Maybe we're all going to agree. I have no idea, but we thought going in, if we're going to go live, this is the one to do it for because it's such a strong opinion-based episode subject that we wanted to bring your guys' opinions into it as well. So if you're watching us, be sure to go and comment in the comments section. Share your thoughts because we want to include you guys in this as well. I've been talking for far too long, so let me bring in the boys as well. Dylan, TJ, great to have you on with me tonight. How are we doing?
Doing good. Doing really good. It's football season still. Yeah, if Brandon, our old podcast mate, were on here, he'd say it's hockey season, and I'd tell him to go shove it. But that's not what's happening right now. It's football season, college football, a lot of controversy. Excited to talk it over.
It's even better for you, obviously, because, I mean, if you couldn't tell the sports where you have on that jersey, yep, TJ, for those that are listening on the podcast, is wearing the Oklahoma gear. He has been a Sooners fan for a very long time, and his team has made it back into the college football playoff. So, congratulations to you, TJ. Dylan, how you doing, my friend?
Great. I thought TJ was going to give us a full spin there, the full view of that jersey there. But yeah, happy to be here. And like you said, college football playoff. I think I can speak for all three of us when I say it's one of our favorite episodes to do every year, just going at it back and forth and just debating because there's always controversy. There's always something that, you're never going to have everybody being happy. So we love talking about it, and I'm excited to get into it with you boys.
The best part is no matter who's right or who's wrong, Dylan, we're going to have fun talking about it. No matter if we're Florida State fans or Iowa fans or Mizzou fans, Dylan, it's a really good time to talk some football.
Hey, don't let TJ blaspheme on my name here. I'm Mizzou first and foremost through and through. So I'm the one that's going to be the most unhappy because Mizzou did not make the CFP, nor should they have. I'm not suggesting that in any way, shape, or form. But these two over here are Bama and OU fans, so they're sitting pretty right now, and I am not as much.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate finish to the season for the Tigers, and there most certainly will be upcoming episodes where we dive into what is next for Mizzou. This will not be one of them. It is college football playoff time. It is time to evaluate. If you have not seen the rankings, the final rankings, aka if you live under a rock, this is what they look like as I pull it up here on the old video. There we go. And for those that are listening, I'll go ahead and read it off as well. Indiana, following their Big Ten championship win over the former number one team in the country, Ohio State, jumped to the number one spot. They are followed by Ohio State. The SEC champions, the Georgia Bulldogs, are at number 3. They are followed by Texas Tech, who won the Big 12 in decisive fashion. So those are the 4 bye teams. Those are the 4 teams that will not play in the first round of the college football playoff: Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech. They are followed by Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama, Miami, Tulane, and James Madison. You see there at the bottom of your screen the first 4 teams out: Notre Dame, BYU, Texas, and Vanderbilt. And there are certainly several notable things about this list, gentlemen. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're going to get right into it. We're going to talk about what has been by far the most controversial part of this whole thing, maybe the most controversial decision since the college football playoff became a thing back in 2014. And that is the committee deciding to, at the last minute, quite literally the last minute, flip Miami and Notre Dame. The entire college football playoff, Notre Dame had ranked during the rankings, which started, I believe, in week 10. Notre Dame had not been ranked below 10. All they had done was won up to that point. And then, after this final conference championship weekend, Miami slips into that spot and are going to the college football playoff. Notre Dame will be sitting at home. They will not be playing in a bowl game. And that is where our conversation begins. The title of the episode is "Did the Committee Get It Right?" So I will start off with that, and we will go from there. Dylan, start us off, big fella. When you look at this, when you look at the rankings, the final rankings, who will be heading to the college football playoff, do you like it? Are you a fan? Do you support it? Do you back it? Did the committee get this right?
Oh boy. I don't know, honestly, that there is a right decision in all of this. There's always nuance and there's going to be mess and chaos. And this is just about as messy and chaotic as it gets or has gotten in the history of the CFP, like you said. And every scenario we'll talk through, there's 2 sides of the coin, but somebody's always going to be unhappy unless if it's 136 team playoff, everybody in FBS making the CFP. But I would say the committee got right the head-to-head of Miami and Notre Dame, but I think what I've seen a lot of Notre Dame nobody's going to sit here and pretend that any of those 4 teams are better than Tulane and James Madison. So that's obviously what everyone is frustrated with, rightfully so, about 2 group of 5 teams making it in over those first 4 teams out, all of which we know would beat the brakes off of both of those group of 5 teams. But I think what I've seen a lot of people be frustrated about from the Notre Dame side is, in addition to the last minute switch with Miami, is just even with Alabama, like all of the other conference championship losers were punished and dropped in the rankings, except for Alabama. And you think about if that had hypothetically happened, it could have put maybe Miami and Notre Dame both in the CFP. And so I think that's probably one of the gripes that people are going to have. But in terms of right and wrong, I can see the committee's decision-making, like why they put Miami over Notre Dame. But what was just horrible throughout was the messaging from the start. Either Notre Dame should have been above Alabama and Miami from the start or above neither of them from the start. And that was the big thing a couple weeks ago when Bama lost to Oklahoma and flipped. Notre Dame was 9 at the time. Bama was 10. Notre Dame beats Pittsburgh at Pitt. Bama loses to Oklahoma, and yet Bama flips up to 9, and Notre Dame goes down to 10. So the committee, per usual, did not have everything perfectly right. Their messaging, I think, was the worst thing. It was just so inconsistent and, just trying to tell people what they wanted to hear. So that's my overarching view. I know that was long-winded, but that's my general thoughts over at least the Notre Dame snub being first out.
TJ, before I get your did the committee get this right? Did they get it wrong? I'll ask you, Dylan brought up the messaging of the college football playoff. We're going to have plenty of time to discuss all of this. Were you at all suspicious of the college football playoff's reasoning in, as Dylan said, Notre Dame was 9, Alabama was 10 after your Sooners defeated my Crimson Tide. The next week, or maybe it was 2 weeks later, it was 2 weeks later, after rivalry weekend, Alabama and Notre Dame flip. What was your thoughts in that entire situation? Were you a little bit suspicious of that?
I mean, yes, because I'm more of an NFL guy. For people who are just logging on, I'm more of an NFL guy than I am college. And NFL, it's objective. Everybody's on the exact same playing field. There's no Tulanes or James Madisons. There's just the Cleveland Browns and everybody else. Everybody else is pretty good. Cleveland Browns are terrible. But it felt to me like you were allowed to lobby or to politic your way into the top 12. And that's what gave me pause, was this idea that it's no longer about objective standards. Like, if Miami whines long enough, they'll get their way. Or was the playoff committee just banking on Notre Dame to lose one of the games in their soft schedule after the first 2 games that they lost? It does give me pause, Ethan. Quickly, though, I would say that I do think the College Football Committee got it right. I think, at the very least, the right teams within the confines of the rules that are given, they got those teams right. If we're going to say that it has to be the top 5 conference champs and we're going to let Duke win the ACC, yeah, I think Tulane and James Madison should be in there. Do I think we should build off of this? Absolutely. I don't think we should have a Tulane and James Madison in the playoffs at the same time again, unless it's like 2040 and these teams become more prevalent in our sport. I will say this would be a benefit if Notre Dame were in a conference. They would have a chance to play in the last game of the year before the playoff and actually officially stamp themselves instead of relying on a weak schedule when they lost to a team that's really close to them. For me, why would I put people in a bad position to not make a good call? You know, at the beginning of the day, they had the opportunity to go 2-0 in the first 2 weeks, and then there's no question. But because they lost to those 2 teams, and eye test wise, they looked great the rest of the year. But it's hard for me to vouch for them when they're not playing the highest quality competition. So, yes, I am skeptical. I do think we need some form of rules and regulations that the committee needs to go by. But based on what we have right now, this is the best outcome in my opinion.
So, I think the most interesting part about everything that we saw over the last couple of days was what obviously was the most popular thing that everyone is talking about, right? And it was that flip. And it's not that the flip occurred, but for me, it's when the flip occurred. What was the reasoning behind Miami and Notre Dame taking so long to flip? We heard Arkansas athletic director and the commissioner of the College Football Playoff Committee, Hunter Yurachek, share his explanation with Reese Davis and all the guys on ESPN during that final show, where he basically said that because there was a team between Notre Dame and Miami, they couldn't flip those 2 because they thought that Notre Dame was better than BYU, but that BYU was better than Miami. And that frustrated the absolute heck out of me because, listen, I get this. Comment coming in here from Larry saying Notre Dame was screwed. Notre Dame was screwed in the sense of they, during this entire rankings, ever since the first one had come out, had been in. They had been in. And you're telling me that head-to-head, which, I mean, that should, in my opinion, head-to-head should by far be the most important resume comp. That should by far be the most. You're telling me that couldn't have an impact until those 2 teams were right next to each other? Listen, this is so frustrating to me because, one, this could have been handled so much better, and all this controversy could have been avoided if the committee would have done a better job communicating their decision-making process in the weeks leading up to who was going to make the college football playoff. You're telling me that Hunter Yurachek, when Alabama and Notre Dame flipped and Alabama jumped back ahead of them, that the reasoning was actually, well, these two teams on rivalry weekend, Alabama had a 17-point lead against Auburn on the road, and they ran the ball much better. You're telling me that that's a reason to flip them? Notre Dame beat the heck out of their competition. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have been flipped, because they should have. But the reason can be as simple as this. Yeah, we overcorrected last week. And the reality is, when you compare the two resumes, Alabama's is significantly better. They've beaten better teams. Yes, they had that worst loss. The Florida State loss was obviously not pretty, but they have the best win in the country. And they had the best 4-game series in the country by far of anyone that they played. The resumes do not compare of those two teams. It could have been as simple as that, but they had to put on this entire, Alabama, they had a 17-point lead against Auburn. Guess what? They blew that 17-point lead. I mean, like, one sentence destroys the entire argument if that's your reasoning for flipping the two. And it's so frustrating because that's the things like that is what make people think, oh, they're protecting Alabama. That's so ridiculous. It's
they
so
were
ridiculous.
Protecting Alabama.
Well, the stupid thing is that I don't think that they were, or that was their intention, in that they're like, oh, well, we have to get Alabama in, and so we have to do this in order to get Alabama in. Well, if that was the case, then Alabama wouldn't have gotten in last year. I know you were messing with me, but the messaging of all of this was so ridiculous. And the other scenario, right, was when it came to Notre Dame, Miami, is that they weren't in the same groupings of their rankings, right? So for those that aren't aware, when the College Football Playoff Committee gathers together, they aren't just each of them individually sharing their 1 through 25 and then they just math it up and average them all out. That's not what they do. What they do is they look at the entire field and they break them into tiers, into groups. So maybe it's 1 through 3, 4 through 8, 9 through 11. They are breaking them up based off of where they feel like the teams around them that are similar to them, right? So that whenever they feel there is a drop off, that is when the next group starts. Their reasoning earlier on during when they were explaining the reason for separation, the reason that Notre Dame was ahead of Miami, was because they weren't in the same groupings. You're telling me those two weren't in the same groupings until this past week? Come on. Hunter Yurachek, College Football Playoff Committee, you guys should be ashamed of yourself, because all of this anger, all of this controversy is 100% on you guys. And Notre Dame is not maybe this is controversial, but Notre Dame's not playing in a bowl game because of you guys. I think they should be regardless. I think it's a little bit cowardly that they're not, but this whole situation could have been avoided. So I digress. Whoever wants to take it from there.
I'll say something. So I was listening to a source online who was exclaiming that you don't want to learn how a hot dog gets made, or maybe sometimes when you're eating a hot dog, you're like, you know what, I wonder how this gets made. And then if you listen or hear how it got made, you're like, oh crap, I do not want anything to do with knowing how that hot dog got made. And similarly, fans are calling for accountability. They're calling for, like, well, committee, why did you make this decision? And then when we don't like the decision they make, we get all upset about it. Part of me would almost rather be in the dark. Like, if there is a world where Bama is being brought in because of some biases by the committee, or maybe they think TV ratings would be higher if Bama's in the playoffs. Again, Bama's not the sole purpose of my talk. It's just an example. Then I wouldn't want to hear that, because it shows how broken the sport is. And it makes, as an Oklahoma fan or even as a Mizzou fan, it makes me feel like my team has less of a chance than I actually think they do, when the purpose of bringing these non-Power 4 teams into the playoff is to give other teams hope so they can recruit better, so they can have more NIL, all these things. And so part of me agrees with you, Ethan, in the sense of, like, I don't like the way it was handled. But another part of me is like, if we keep calling for reasoning, we're going to find out how much help our sport still needs. Like, the sport hasn't made it yet. They're still talking about expanding even more than just a 12-team playoff. So to say that we've arrived in some way is to say that we're done growing and we've hit like the maximum space where we need to be. Remember, guys, a couple years ago, we had a 4-team playoff. A couple years before that, we had a 2-team playoff, like 2-team BCS national championship. So I'm not condoning what they're doing, but I do think there's a level of it's going to be messy from this point forward, and we just got to kind of accept that. With that being said, committee, y'all suck. Why'd you do that? Yeah. We just need consistency, or to have. I just wish they would have switched Miami Notre Dame earlier. It makes me feel like you can politic your way into the college football playoff, and that makes me upset.
Dylan, it almost makes me think, based off of TJ, what you just said there, which I agree with everything you said. If we don't like the answers we're getting, and we don't like the way the process is going about, I mean, if I took anything from this season of college football in these last 5 rankings that we have seen from the committee, what is the point of having a week by week ranking? What's the point? What's the purpose of it? What does it do? It almost feels like you said, TJ, yeah, part of me would rather be in the dark. And if Notre Dame was put in and there were no rankings whatsoever leading, I would still be upset because that head-to-head is still there. But I guarantee you this, if the committee comes out with the rankings that they have and they hadn't had any rankings prior to that, people would have been way less upset. They probably still would have been upset because fans are fans and they're going to fan. But, I mean, the whole reason people are upset is because of that random flip. Dylan?
Yeah, I think I disagree with you guys on this one. I think that undoubtedly the best solution would just be better messaging from the committee. I think if people think it's corrupt now or conspiracy minded now, like imagine how much louder that would be if there were no rankings, if they didn't have to be transparent in that regard. So it's definitely screwed up. Don't get me wrong. That's part of what my frustration with the Florida State decision in 2023 stemmed from, is that they had been in the rankings all the way leading up. They had been in the top 4 all the way leading up to that moment until the final rankings. Similar thing with Notre Dame, where they've been in the entire time up until the final decision. So that definitely needs to improve. I don't know how you do that. Some people have said, let us listen in on the committee meetings. That's never going to happen for transparency, but that would be awesome to understand where they're coming from, at least with their decisions. But it also could just lead to more frustration of like, wow, this is really how it gets done. Like you said, TJ, this is how the hot dog gets made. So I would say I am more in favor of keeping the rankings and just them being more transparent and more consistent, but that just comes down to people being better at their jobs. There's not really a structural thing you can do to fix that. So I understand why people would say we'd rather be off, in the dark the entire time. But I think that would just, let people fester in their minds of, oh, this is rigged. They're making shady deals. They don't have to publish their rankings and whatnot. So, and also for everybody that's kind of, oh, Notre Dame got what they deserve. They've always been entitled and kind of like getting what's coming to them. Like, I understand that sentiment because Notre Dame has benefited for a long time from being an independent. But if it were any other team, the fan base would be saying the same thing. Like they would be banging the same drum of, this is ridiculous. Why are we at home and now we're having to watch, Oregon blow out James Madison when Oregon Notre Dame probably would have been the game of the first round. And yeah.
Let's be real, okay? Notre Dame's at home because they're choosing to be at home right now. They could be prepping for a bowl game right now. This is not entirely on the committee. On top of that,
that's a quick way to make everybody lose any pity they had for you, is sit out your bowl game.
Well, my team's in the playoffs, so I don't even have to worry. Think about this, okay? If you have more information about your team, it only helps the committee make a better decision or shows how much worse the decision was by the committee. If they're in a conference and they have consistency year to year, showing who they play, how good they do year to year, it helps the committee make better choices regarding Notre Dame instead of having this favorite child in the corner perspective of them. I think personally, I think there's a little bit of conference bias in the Miami pick because why else would they make that switch? I mean, there had to have been something else besides like this is a conspiracy. This is totally just TJ talking. Okay, I think they wanted a good team from the ACC to be in the college football playoff, and I think that Miami was the best one to do it because they weren't happy with the teams that were potentially going to be in the running. Like if Virginia were in the playoff, we don't know, but I just think that Miami was going to be a team in the playoff because ACC was underwhelmed, and you have to protect the brand of Power Four. And so that's my personal opinion, kind of out there in the dark. But
I think that that's most certainly at least a portion of the argument, and that is the thing that would absolutely drive people insane to hear. But I would be shocked if it wasn't at least a part of the reasoning of flipping those two, because like I said, the messaging of we can't flip those two, the head-to-head doesn't matter unless they are right next to each other, has to be one of the dumbest arguments I have ever heard. It makes me so freaking mad. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Loose Sports Talk podcast on STL Sports Central. Normally, our videos are not live, but tonight, because it is such a hot topic, we figured why not? Let's go live. Usually, our content releases every Wednesday morning under the video section on STL Sports Central, and then also on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Samuel, a regular here on STL Sports Central, commenting saying, Notre Dame represents themselves. Miami represents the whole ACC. I mean, if we want to talk about, about the work that Miami is doing in this playoff, putting the ACC on their back right now, just trying to hold the conference together. I mean, holding it together by the power of friendship. Holy moly, that conference is in a bad spot right now. All caps.
Especially with Clemson, they're supposed to be really good this year. Clemson was supposed to be good. I mean, I think Miami was supposed to be good too before they lost like randomly to like Louisville and I can't remember the other team.
SMU.
Yeah, I mean, they were up to number 2. They may have been number 1
they were number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and maybe it's just me. SMU, I'm still getting used to them being an ACC team. Like I'm just used to them
because they're in Texas.
What are you doing in the ACC when you're in Texas? It doesn't make no sense.
Yeah, okay. I think that's another. Go ahead. I think that's part of the reason for the frustration also is the comparison of, we all know there's 2 conferences that are the best 2, but the committee has to say on paper, we view all 4 of these teams, 4 of these conferences equally, and it just creates a mess. And I think going by that, their established standard, teams like BYU can have a gripe where they look at an SEC conference champion that didn't drop, but they dropped after losing their conference championship to a team that's number 4. Granted, that Bama team also beat number 3 Georgia on the road earlier in the season. So it's just the messaging of the committee is enjoyed by no one, I think, where everybody knows it's a power 2, but they say it's a power 4, and then you see decisions like this and like, well, that's not true.
So let's go ahead and let's talk about the elephant in the room. No pun intended. Anyone? Come on. Blue Sports Talk, baby. Alabama, number 9. A lot of people upset about it, especially because of the way in which they lost their conference championship game against Georgia. They were 10-2 in the regular season, 10-3 overall following that really ugly loss. We talked about the very impressive stretch they had midway through the year that included beating Georgia, the best win in college football this year. They also had one of the worst Power 4 losses in college football this year, losing to Florida State in the opening game of the year. So let's talk about this. I know you guys said that you think that the playoff committee got this right in the end, but let's talk specifically about the comp of Alabama to Notre Dame and Miami and our thoughts as to, where Alabama fits in this. If we think Alabama should have been in the spot that they ended up in, free reign over who would like to start.
This is where quality of conference comes in, because you can make the argument that BYU has a pretty good argument to be in the playoff. Maybe not over Bama, but also to make it. But because we don't view the Big 12 the same way we view SEC and Georgia, the SEC, Georgia, Bama, and the Big 10 with Ohio State and Indiana, we're not going to put them in. So probably the right call. I think we should have a majority teams be Big 10 and SEC. The rate where they rate it is different, and this is where the non-Power 4 teams come in. So, oh my gosh, Ethan, Bama is getting the chat lighting up right now.
I would love to hear, because this is why we're live. We want to hear your opinions. We want to hear your thoughts. Let's have a knockdown, drag out, baby. Because I'm ready to go to war with y'all. Why? So let's start with Vaughn. Vaughn, tell us, why should Bama have been out? Who should have been in their place? Samuel saying Vandy over Bama. Well, if we want to talk about head-to-head between Miami and Notre Dame, then we certainly have to talk about head-to-head between Vanderbilt and Alabama. I do agree that Vandy had a tough go, and I think you could have made a better argument for them squeezing in there as well in the 10 spot, along with Notre Dame and Miami. But over Bama, I think is a little bit silly. And here is my biggest pushback against this. We talked about the regular season slate, but the real reason that everyone is arguing that Alabama should be out is because of the way that they played against Georgia. Would we agree with that? The way that they got absolutely dog walked, no pun intended, by the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC championship. Dylan, would you agree with that?
I would expand it out to the last month or so. I think that Iron Bowl win was pretty ugly too, so it's more so been the last month or so, and then that loss to Oklahoma. But yeah, that was the most seen, most visible moment of it for sure was the Georgia loss.
Well,
so go ahead.
Let's add into consideration Vanderbilt also beat Bama barely, or not Bama, Auburn barely. There's a couple of similarities within the schedule. Vanderbilt's schedule was a lot lighter outside of SEC play. That's another thing to consider.
Yeah, 100% is. I mean, I'm trying to think back through their biggest wins of the year. LSU was a big game at the time. That's when LSU still was good here. And these, I think people are still trying to figure out, how do you view the games in which a team is good at the time and it's considered a big win at the time, but then those teams fall off? LSU fell off pretty hard once Brian Kelly got fired, maybe even a little bit before that. But at the time, that win for Vanderbilt was considered a great win over LSU. Another example that I can think of, probably the most extreme example of this throughout the year, is Oregon's win over Penn State. Penn State absolutely collapsed after that loss against Oregon, but a lot of people would argue that that is what broke them. They were a top 5 team in the country prior to that. So it's also hard trying to balance out this. Well, it was viewed as a good win when it happened, but then is it just not viewed as a good win at all by the end of the season? Does it just lose some of its credibility? I think that's something that people are still trying to figure out. But that is a great point, Dylan, in that it was not just the SEC championship. They had started to look worse and worse week by week. Obviously, they had the loss at home against Oklahoma, and then they kind of squeezed it out against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Devil's advocate could say that that place is haunted, that every single time that those two teams play there, it ends up being something like that. But you make good points in the sense of bad stretch run for Alabama at the end. But this is also where the conversation comes into play, right? Is it how you look at the end of the season, or is it the year-long resume? Right? Because if it's year-long resume, then I think that Alabama probably has the edge over Florida State. But if it's how you look at the end, I don't know how many people are arguing against that Notre Dame was one of a handful of teams that probably had a good chance at the national championship. They looked really strong the last, 6 weeks, 2 months of the season. It's hard to know for sure based off of who they were playing in large part, but even when they had a couple of games against okay teams, I would throw, I guess the most notable ones would be USC and Pitt. They looked really good. But we know that the committee is not looking at these games and saying that it's based solely off of how you look at the end of the year. It is a year-long resume, and you're basing it off far more than just how you look at the end of the year. And in my opinion, you look at the FPI rankings, you look at the strength of schedule, the strength of record rankings. Alabama's the only team in the country that was top 10 in those categories. Notre Dame was 45th in strength of schedule. 45th. They had one notable win, in my opinion, and that was USC. Yes, they had a couple of good losses. In what world are good losses more credible than good wins? Not a world in which I'm living in.
It's also about the timing of those wins and losses. Like, you can have a season-long trajectory of good wins, but if Ty Simpson, for example, if he looks terrible at the end of the season from the Oklahoma game on, like, that should take some form of effect. If we have early season Ty Simpson for the entire season, they're probably winning the SEC championship. Like, it's probably not even a question. But because it was the newer Ty Simpson that kind of feels broken, the timing of the loss had the opportunity to kick them out. Meanwhile, Notre Dame was surging at the right time. But if they had even one quality win in that grouping, I think they make it over Miami. But there's enough reason, clearly, to where people haven't like knocked on the committee's door and said, hey, we're not going to watch your program anymore. We're still going to watch the games, So clearly they didn't do something that was so wrong. Yeah.
Your thoughts on this comment and the next point of subject. The championship game doesn't count, I heard. And Samuel referring to Alabama not being punished for that bad loss. How should the committee view conference championships and, how to either hurt teams, move them down, or reward them with them?
Dylan, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think also a couple points of what you guys were talking about. I think this stems back to the committee's messaging with, you were talking about, okay, does resume matter more throughout the season or at the end of the season? And committee said, okay, it matters the entire season head-to-head, but we only pay attention to it at the very end when we don't have any other teams in between Notre Dame and Miami. So now we can make the flip. So that goes back to that bad messaging. And with the Vanderbilt gripe, I think they would have been a great team to see in the playoff. I mean, Diego Pavia is a Heisman candidate, has a chance at winning it. He's a finalist now, and they're one of the hottest teams in the country. They demolished Tennessee in Neyland the last game of the regular season for them. So it would have been fun to see them, but, Ethan said head-to-head is the ultimate metric, and if we're judging Notre Dame and Miami by that, then that disqualifies Vanderbilt there in that loss to Alabama. But in terms of championship, I think this is what I was talking about with BYU earlier, because, like we've heard ad nauseum that you don't want to punish a team for losing a conference championship, and rightfully so, because then why would you want to even make the conference championship if it's going to hurt you? I think the reason people were frustrated is because, okay, we saw Indiana leapfrog Ohio State for, who was that more so to do with Ohio State losing, or was it just rewarding Indiana for winning? Either way, Ohio State dropped. And then you also had BYU drop after their loss to Texas Tech. The difference was BYU was already out. They weren't going into that conference championship matchup, because other metrics, they line up pretty similarly to Bama. I mean, they have one less loss. They have a better strength of record. Bama's 10th, BYU's 9th. And like I said, BYU's only losses were to a top 4 seeded Texas Tech. And so, I think if it hadn't been for them not already being out, then it would have been a different conversation. But it was an easier decision for in the committee's mind, at least, because BYU was 11 going in. So who are you going to leapfrog them with if they were, if they had lost? So
can we agree that there are levels to punishment? Can we agree that there are levels to punishment? That one versus
not according to the committee.
I'm not following where the committee said that there wasn't, because clearly the committee showed that there are different levels of punishment. I think we can all agree.
Weighing the power forward equally is what I was saying.
Sure, I'm more so referring to the comparison of the different conference championships and how teams moved in the final rankings. Indiana and Ohio State flipping. Well, it was a head-to-head. It doesn't severely punish either of the two. You already mentioned that BYU was already out, so moving them down, it doesn't do anything. They're already out. The only one in which it would have severely impacted is Alabama. The only legitimate punishment that any of the teams for losing their conference championship would have received is Alabama, because they would have been the only team that would have been in going into conference championship week. They would have been in if they didn't play in their conference championship, and would have been out as a result of losing that game. I don't know how, especially after last year, and hey, I will full on admit, my Bama fan coming out in me last year, I was like, Bama should be in over SMU. They're the better team. I still think they were the better team, but I understand that you cannot punish a team for losing their conference championship when everyone else in their conference, all of those at-large teams, were sitting around eating bonbons, as Samuel said, getting too fat on cupcakes, while they were all hanging out on the couch watching. You were grinding and trying to win a game, and you lost it. Should you be punished for that? I don't see how you can punish the number one seed in the SEC in Alabama for losing that game. It wasn't pretty. I will most certainly agree with everyone out there that it was not pretty, but I don't know how you can argue when everyone else was sitting at home, when Notre Dame was sitting at home, that you can take Alabama out of that spot, a spot that is meant to be an incentive, a reward for being good enough to be there.
Well, it comes back to my earlier point of, if we have more objective information for the committee to use, they can't pull crap like this. Like, they can't. So in this case, if you lose to Georgia after you beat them once, that should carry more weight than a BYU losing twice to the same team in pretty bad fashion both times. What it does, it basically says, okay, they're in the same ballpark, but if you're not playing any championship game, aka Notre Dame and Miami, don't ask me why they put Miami in. We already talked about it. But all it does, it gives them this question mark, this mystery of, okay, well, which of the two do we choose is kind of up to us. If you put in the championship window, in the championship game window, what it essentially does is says, no, these two games played tight. It's going to be really hard for us to ignore that. Unless it's like a third loss, like Texas, for example, did too little too late, didn't do enough to make it into the playoff. Texas fans are currently, they were trying to politic up until the moment that the playoff was decided, but it goes to show that destiny really is in your own hands. But if you're in a conference championship, that could be a benefit. It doesn't have to be a huge negative, and Bama proved that. This is why I think Bama should have been in the playoff. They shouldn't have been kicked out.
Dylan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the easiest solution. Yeah, I think the easiest solution would have been the ACC not being so bad this year, and had Miami been the ACC conference champion, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion, because you would have Miami, Notre Dame, and Alabama all in, and then only one group of 5 team. So that just threw a wrench in everything. Hopefully those tiebreakers get resolved. I think it was like the 5th or 6th tiebreaker that meant Duke and Virginia in the ACC title game, and so that would be A. But I would say also, I think that conference championship losses should have weight. You can't do it in the existing system. But John Gruden put out a great video the other day saying how he would fix it, and just making, it's a great video to go watch. It's only about 10 minutes long, but just make the teams that are, on the fringe, the Vanderbilt, the Texas, the Notre Dame now, make them play each other or play teams that are lose a conference championship, and that decides who gets in. Or if you lose a conference championship, you're not in. So Gruden explained it better than I just did, but that would be a better solution, as opposed to an extra free bye for a team that didn't play in a conference championship. You look at a team like Oregon sitting at the 5 seed right now. By the time we get to the playoff matchup, they will have had essentially a bye week, and then the Army-Navy game and a week off. So 3 weeks off, and then they play JMU. So that's basically 4 free weeks that Oregon has to rest up. And granted, will it be rest or rust? Last year we saw rust for the 4 bye teams all losing. But, I mean, it would be nice, I would think, to be able to get some players back from injury potentially if you're Dan Lanning in Oregon. So that's my 2 cents on it. If our friend Brandon were here, he would share his SEC conspiracy theory, is that he's been saying the last 4 or 5 years that probably the SEC and Big Ten won't even be in the NCAA in the next 10 years. So that would be within the next 5 years now. And so he would say, oh, they had to put Bama in, otherwise Sankey would pull the SEC from the NCAA. So that's speaking for Brandon here, but that's my thoughts.
This is where the professional versus student athlete debate comes in. Can you afford to put students on a plane from Wisconsin or from Notre Dame and fly them to USC or to a California school on a weekend, get them back right in the middle of finals or in the off? Like there's repercussions to everything the committee does, and adding another game similar to the NFL makes more money for everybody, but also puts more damage on the players, more stress on the coaches. There's just a lot to it. Because it's a professional product, I don't think Dylan's crazy for suggesting what he just suggested, but I think there's going to be more backlash than an NFL product having an extended week. I love the idea of playing. It's objective, but then my question would be, what would even be the point of the committee in that regard? You know, the committee's purpose is supposed to be to fix the gray area, and clearly not everybody agrees with that. That's why it's gray. So we're not going to find a perfect solution. The playing game would be really interesting. I think one of our commenters had said that what if we just made like a playing game as the conference championship? So whoever wins the conference championship would get in, which essentially is what's happening already. But yeah, that's student athletes, man.
Yeah,
student
and the last thing that I'll bring up before we wrap with our playoff predictions is that, Dylan, what you said about Miami and the ACC going to the ridiculous tiebreaker that they did at that point, my goodness, put Miami in the freaking thing. I mean, how deep do we have to go to get to that point? It got really ridiculous there. You could have saved a lot of issues if, one, you would have had a better quality conference, but also I imagine there's going to be some tweaks made to those tiebreakers down the road so that they can set it up to where they have a little bit more say in who ends up in that game once you get beyond the first couple of tiebreakers, because for Duke to play in that game in the place of Miami was absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that Duke, who lost 5 games this year, was able to beat a ranked Virginia team really tells you about just where some of these conferences are and how, I think there is a little bit of padding going on, even in the weaker conferences, ranking them, but then losing to a 5-loss team like Duke. I don't know. It's a very interesting time that we're in right now. But the last thing I want to bring up here real quick, there's 2 G5 teams in the college football playoff this year, James Madison and Tulane. And man, I have to imagine that there's going to be some tweaks made to this format, because there is in no way possible that the committee can ever allow this to happen again. Not where there's necessarily 2 G5 teams in the first place, but 2 G5 teams in that are expected to be this bad. There are G5 teams in the past, when you look back on the last 15, 20 years of college football, where you're like, okay, that team maybe could have made things interesting. You had some Boise State teams over the past years, maybe even TCU before they were in the Power 5. Central Florida, you've had teams that have been there in the past that you think, okay, that could be kind of interesting. But this year is not one of those years. I wonder if at some point there is a minimum bar that is set to where, okay, we have a conference championship rule, but here's the extra little divot there. If you are a conference champion and you're the lone representative in the playoff, you can't be below this ranking for us, because then you don't have situations like this where you have the 20th and the 25th ranked teams making the college football playoff. That best win is not against a Power 5 team this year, Power 4 team.
Yeah, I would be shocked if that doesn't get changed. I think the committee showed their willingness to listen to people's gripes in the rule change they made for this year from last year's playoff, to where the conference champions no longer get an automatic top 4 seed, which was the case last year. And so we saw a Mountain West Boise State be a top 4 seed. And so you showed they're willing to make change. And I would think that this would change almost instantly, the threshold you put forward, Ethan. But one thing I do want to just soapbox on real quick that I think should also be changed is just fixing the calendar, because you look at Ole Miss, and I'm grateful that they weren't dropped because those players didn't put any, bad game on tape, so to speak. But that situation should never happen again. Ole Miss would have been a team that would have probably made a run and had a chance at the national title. And now that's pretty much in shambles because their head coach and a lot of their offensive staff is gone from the Lane Kiffin move to LSU. So that's something that I hope gets fixed in the future as well, so that you're at least committed to a team for a season. Throughout the entire season, we can see a team that has the potential to win a national title make their.
Well said. Couldn't agree anymore. All right, boys, we have hit the 50-minute mark. It's time to start wrapping this thing up. We're going to very quickly run through our national championship projections. Just very quickly, walk me through your playoff bracket and who you have winning each game to get to who will be the 2025 college football playoff national champion. I will start with you, Dylan.
Okay, quickly going through the first round. I have James. No, I'm just kidding. I have
No.
Oregon knocking off JMU. I have Oklahoma beating Bama once again. I have Ole Miss knocking off Tulane, and I have Texas A&M defeating Miami. Another quick gripe: that game should be under the lights. That's an 11 a.m. game, and now we have to watch JMU and Oregon in prime time. Switch that. Kyle Fields, the top atmosphere in the country. You want me to go to the next round or do TJ's first round?
Go to your next round.
Okay, second round. So I've got, this is going to get a little spicy here, but you know me. I've got Texas Tech knocking off Oregon. I have Indiana handling Oklahoma, Georgia knocking off Ole Miss, and I have A&M upsetting Ohio State. So that puts in my semis, that puts Indiana, Texas Tech, Georgia, and A&M. And so I would have Indiana knocking off Tech and Georgia knocking off A&M to give you a Georgia-Indiana national title. And I think the Dogs and Kirby Smart are taking home the trophy again this year. Give me Georgia.
All righty, there you go. A couple of toasty ones in there. I really like that. I like that. I like that bracket. Sounds pretty good. Okay, I'll go ahead and go next. I know, right? We're agreeing. Are you feeling okay? Okay, here we go. My college football playoff bracket. I have Oregon spanking up on James Madison. I have Alabama beating Oklahoma. It's hard to beat a team twice, and I think that Bama will be able to get healthy enough. That is true. Ole Miss beating Tulane, and I have Texas A&M beating Miami. So for the second round, I have Ohio State beating Texas A&M. Georgia beating Ole Miss. I have Indiana beating Alabama, and I have Oregon beating Texas Tech. I have Georgia beating Ohio State in what will be the true national championship in the semifinal, and then I have Indiana beating Oregon in the other semifinal game, and then I have the same final, Georgia and Indiana, and I have Georgia winning the national championship as well this year. Kirby Smart just has that team playing the right way. They've gotten better every single week, and I know Bama has looked a little bit bumpy the last few weeks, but what they did to Alabama in that game, I mean, they absolutely just broke them. That was extremely impressive, and I have a hard time believing that anyone's going to beat them.
Sorry, I had trouble finding my mute button. Yeah, I went through my bracket and I realized I just picked a lot of favorites. So I have to go out and I have to pick a non-favorite for some of these games. So game one, I have Oregon taking care of James Madison. I have Oklahoma beating Bama. I just don't know if Ty Simpson is going to be able to rebound in time. But I usually agree with Ethan in the 2 games in a row is tough to pull off. Tulane loses to Ole Miss, so Ole Miss moves forward. And then the Texas A&M Miami game, I have Miami beating Texas A&M. And I don't think there's a lot of real logic. It's more of a gut feeling. I just think senior leadership, Texas A&M sometimes plays with their food a little too long. So I think Miami has a chance to actually do something. Next round, Oregon beats Texas Tech. Oklahoma loses to Indiana. Georgia beats Ole Miss. Ohio State takes care of Miami. The dream is done from that point for Miami. So my final 4 is Oregon at Indiana and Georgia at Ohio State, technically, I guess. And I have a rematch of the Big Ten championship as my national title. And I don't think Fernando Mendoza is going to have a very peppy speech in the middle of the game. I think that Ohio State will take care of business. Matthew Saylor, if you're listening, you're welcome.
There you have it. So Dylan has Georgia, I have Georgia, and TJ has Ohio State. I can tell you this much. TJ and I most certainly will be watching Alabama, Oklahoma together. TJ, I will talk to you after this episode about plans. Hey, this was a bunch of fun. It was so much fun getting to hang out with you guys and talk a little bit of college football. We have one final comment we're going to throw up here. Sarah Bacon saying that guy in red sure knows what he's talking about. This is the last episode that TJ will be on before he gets hitched. That's right. TJ Williamson is getting married 2 days after Christmas. Boy, that is going to be a banger of a time. Looking forward to that. Congratulations, TJ. We're so happy for you. And miracles do happen. Miracles do happen.
That's why I said Miami's going to win.
This has been a fun one. Appreciate all of you out there watching tonight, listening, whenever you are. Follow us on our social medias at Loose Sports Talk _ on Instagram, X, Facebook, and then be sure to like and subscribe STL Sports Central here. They are presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And like I said, you can normally find our videos under the videos tab on STL Sports Central if you like watching here on YouTube. And who knows, maybe we'll pop up on the live stream a little bit more often on Tuesday night. But for now, episode number 90, that's a wrap.